I work at a prestigious financial institution in the US, and while I'm not one to brag, I'd say I'm doing pretty well for myself, especially at 32. Things were looking good, with plenty of opportunities ahead. But the real twist in my life came 6 years ago, at a conference, where I struck up a conversation with a woman sitting next to me. We clicked instantly, and a few months later, we started dating. The relationship blossomed, and before I knew it, we'd been together for years. Recently, my fiancée, Sandy, turned 30, but, of course, with how things have played out, I didn't send any birthday wishes. The memory of her 29th birthday, though, still lingers. It was that day, right then, when I popped the question, and she said yes without hesitation. I can't help but smile when I think back to it. It was one of the happiest moments of my life, and I'm sure it was for her too, though that happiness feels like it's been souring, like milk left out in the sun. We were engaged, so, naturally, everything seemed perfect. Or so I thought. Has anyone else been in this situation? When your partner, hesitant to share their past experiences with their friends, suddenly turns to you for every little detail? I'd been through it before, 2 relationships where I was the one forced to listen to stories of past lovers. I don't think any man, at least not most, wants to hear about the men their girlfriend, fiancé, or wife has been with before. It's the same as I don't go around spilling details about my past either. But it happened. Over time, my fiancé started telling me about her ex, Chris. I didn't mind hearing about him in the beginning. It seemed normal, right? Talking about exes is part of building a relationship. But there were certain details that bothered me, especially when it came to their bedroom life. According to her, Chris had been amazing in bed. In fact, it seemed like it was the only thing keeping her stuck in that toxic relationship. I let it slide, though. She was younger then, immature, I told myself. So, I didn't push. For a while, after hearing so much about Chris in the early stages, I didn't hear anything more. I thought she'd finally gotten over him, and I was happy with that. Fast forward to the months leading up to our wedding, and we were in the midst of planning the big day. Both of us came from well-off families. While I wouldn't say I was rich, I wasn't exactly struggling either. And as much as I didn't mind a small, intimate gathering, Sandy and our families insisted on something grand, so I relented. The search for the venue, though? That's where the trouble started. Everyone wanted something scenic, a private beach, an ancient church, city hall, and on and on. It wasn't a big deal for me, though. I made it clear I was fine with an event space in the city, but apparently, I lacked vision. So, I let them handle the venue search. Sandy told me she and a friend would be checking out a few places, and I couldn't have cared less. She had already gone with a friend to look at caterers, dresses, and everything else, so why would this be any different? After a day of looking, she told me about an old church she liked. She said she was going back in a few days with the same friend to make sure it was still the right choice. I shrugged it off. It didn't matter much to me. A few days later, she confirmed that the church was the one. So, we booked it. The venue was set, and everything seemed fine. Then, it all started to unravel. One day, Sandy went out to sign for a delivery and left her phone on the kitchen island. That's when I saw the notification, "You there, babe?" My heart skipped a beat. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it seemed like Chris was back in the picture. And if there was another Chris calling her babe, well, that would be worse. But, surely, it was just an ex trying to get back in her life, right? Still, I didn't want to make a scene, so I waited for the right moment to find out more. That moment came a few days later. Sandy left her phone behind when she went out with her friend to look at flower arrangements. This time, I couldn't pass up the opportunity. I grabbed her phone and scrolled straight to the messages. There it was. They had been talking. A lot. About the wedding. He'd mentioned the venue, saying it was beautiful, even suggesting they go back there sometime outside of wedding duties. It hit me like a ton of bricks. She'd gone with Chris, her ex, to check out the venue. The same Chris I hadn't heard about in 2 years. The one she'd always said was so great in bed. I kept scrolling, getting more and more nauseous as I went. The messages, the photos, they were as explicit as you could imagine. But the worst part? It all started right around the time they visited the church for the second time. I kept reading, hoping I was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. I was trapped in the nightmare of discovering something I couldn't undo. Finally, I heard the door unlock. Panic set in. I should have put the phone down. I should have pretended I wasn't doing anything. But in that moment, I just didn't care anymore. I wanted her to know what I had found. When she came through the door, her eyes widened the second she saw me holding her phone. She rushed toward me, trying to pass it off with a casual, "What are you doing?" But when she saw the open chat from Chris, there was no pretending anymore. She froze. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She couldn't even try to explain. Her lips trembled as they formed the words, barely audible. "You went through my phone? Really? Are you serious?" The betrayal hung in the air. She tried so hard to shift the blame, to make me out as the villain. But me? I just couldn't help but laugh. Maybe it seemed like I was losing my mind, but at that moment, I didn't care. In her eyes, I could see her retreat. I had no clue what was going on before then, no inkling. But when I mentioned the message from her lover, right after she signed for the package the other day, her face twisted. I had caught her, and it felt almost absurd, like she thought I was crazy for noticing the obvious. But I had my reasons. And I wasn't about to let her turn this around on me. If things had gone your way, I told her, I would have stayed blind, stupidly ignorant, while you kept cheating on me with him. The words stung, but she couldn't deny them. She muttered excuses, trying to twist the situation. It wasn't what it looked like. How could she even try that with me? I knew they had been together. I might have been bluffing, but my gut was screaming at me. She denied it again, over and over. But I wasn't backing down. Not this time. I slid her phone toward her, letting the screen glow ominously between us. "I can't marry a liar," I said. That's when it broke. She crumbled, tears flooding her face, a desperate wail escaping her. "It was just once," she sobbed. "Just once?" I laughed again, that bitter, cynical laugh. "Just once?" I echoed. "You slept with him. You're still in touch with him. Don't lie to me." She kept reaching for me, but I pushed her hands away. Her mistake wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal. The only reason she was calling it that was because I had caught her. If I hadn't, she'd still be carrying on like nothing happened. She'd still be sneaking behind my back, sleeping with him while planning to marry me. The idea of it churned my stomach. I had trusted her completely before all of this. And now I felt like a fool. I stood up, pacing toward the bedroom. I yanked open the closet, grabbed her suitcase, and began tossing her things into it. She followed me, but when she saw what I was doing, her wailing started again. Her tears only fueled the rage I felt. How had I ever considered marrying her? This was insane. "Give me the ring," I demanded. If you could have seen the look on her face, the color draining from her skin, it was like she had seen a ghost. In that moment, I knew she finally understood the magnitude of what she had done. The truth was sinking in for her, a painful realization that she couldn't deny anymore. I held out my hand. She hesitated for what seemed like an eternity. 2 minutes, maybe? Then, without a word, she took off the ring and placed it in my palm. No fight. No protests. A small victory, but it was all I needed. My patience was running thin, and I had already lost too much. With a shove, I packed her suitcase the rest of the way and handed it to her. "Get out," I told her, my voice cold. And she left. Silent. I locked the door behind her, shutting out the chaos, turning off every light, and drowning myself in alcohol. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of missed calls, some from her parents, even from mine. She must have told them by now. The wedding was off. But did she tell them why? I doubted it. Honestly, I couldn't bring myself to talk to anyone. There was nothing they could say that would change anything. I didn't want sympathy. I didn't need them telling me I could work things out. I just needed silence. Knocking at my door interrupted the silence at various points during the day, but I didn't answer. I let it go on until they finally left. It wasn't until the next day that I created a group chat, adding both sets of parents, Sandy, and her siblings. I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. I had to lay it all out there. I sent a long message, detailed, honest, raw, telling them everything, every betrayal. They needed to know, every one of them, if they were going to have a say in this, they needed to understand. I didn't care if they were shocked or upset. I wanted them to know the truth. The silence in the group chat was thick, oppressive. An hour passed before someone reacted. My dad called. I remember his words like they were etched in my brain. Son, I'm sorry. You made the right choice. It'll hurt, but it was the right choice. That line? It stayed with me. It was the kind of strength I needed to hear. A weaker man might have fallen back, given in to the pain. But not me. I never considered going back to that. Not after everything she did. Throughout the day, messages and calls trickled in. Some I answered, some I ignored. The truth was clear, there was no point in anyone trying to convince me. The wedding was off, and there was no going back. Sandy's parents? They never called. Maybe they realized the gravity of what she had done, or maybe they just didn't want to deal with the fallout. Either way, the silence from them felt final. But it wasn't enough for me. Not by a long shot. I had to make her feel what I felt. Calling off the engagement wasn't enough to make her hurt the way I had. She needed to know what true pain felt like. I needed revenge, and I had a plan. We weren't together anymore. So anyone I chose to sleep with was fair game. Even if it was her sister, though that was just an example, I wasn't planning on going that far. I wanted her to hurt, to feel the same devastation I did. The solution was clear: go after the people she hated. Think about it, how would it feel if your partner slept with that guy at the office you can't stand? The one who always gets under your skin, the one you'd never want near your partner? It would sting more than you'd ever expect. And that's exactly what I intended to do. The list was easy to make. Women she despised. Women who had rubbed her the wrong way for reasons I could already guess. Sophia was first. She hated her because she thought Sophia acted like she was all that. That probably meant she was beautiful, and I had to admit, I was curious. Then there was Melissa, a college classmate. Sandy had once been friends with her, but when Melissa slept with one of Sandy's exes, they had a huge fallout. Sandy hated her ever since. And lastly, Toki, a Japanese woman Sandy had always loathed because she acted too cute, too dainty. The kind of woman who made men drool. These women, these enemies, these were the ones I would target. Sophia was easy enough to find. LinkedIn led me to her Instagram, and once I followed her, she followed back almost instantly. From there, I sent the message I knew would turn everything upside down. I spun my usual smooth talk, effortlessly weaving words that I knew would catch her attention. The signs were obvious, she was into me. This little game of ours continued for a full day, each message building more anticipation. Eventually, I threw the question out there, would you like to go on a date? Her answer was a simple, enthusiastic yes. I seized the moment, making it clear I'd be taking photos, lots of photos, with her looking absolutely stunning in every frame. That date ended on a high note, and I couldn't help but feel satisfied with how it all unfolded. Then came Melissa. At this point, I started questioning myself. Was I really doing all of this in the name of revenge? Yet, I was committed now, there was no turning back. Melissa lived 2 states away, but that didn't stop me. I sent her a message on Instagram, even though I hadn't expected much in return. To my surprise, she recognized me instantly. Apparently, my ex and her hadn't kept in touch, but it seemed Melissa had kept tabs on my life, likely out of resentment. And sure enough, I had appeared in enough of my wife's social media posts for her to catch me in the act. I'd been found out. I decided to come clean. I told Melissa I had split with Sandy, and her response was blunt, good. I hated her. The very next message took me by surprise. Oh, I'm sorry, I know you must still love her. But I wasn't about to let her believe that. I reassured her, no, I don't still love her. In fact, I'm looking for someone who shares my disdain for her. Without hesitation, Melissa dialed me up for a voice call. Her urgency intrigued me. As we spoke, I mentioned my ex-fiancée casually, and before I knew it, the words slipped out, I want to get back at her. Melissa, ever the homewrecker, didn't hesitate for a second, you could sleep with me. It was hard to miss the irony of it all, this was exactly the kind of woman Sandy had warned me about. But right now, it played in my favor. Setting it all up was easy. I flew over one weekend, and Melissa and I went bowling, sightseeing, collecting the perfect photographic evidence for my plan. Later, we went back to her house and, well, had some fun. I even got her to pose for some very suggestive photos. The hatred between them was deeper than I had realized. But at this point, it didn't matter. It was all part of the plan. The next step was Toki. I got lucky with this one. She popped up on Tinder, her name standing out in a sea of common ones. Her profile intrigued me, so I sent a message right away. Her replies were slow, but eventually, I managed to get a date. It took 3 attempts to finally seal the deal, but I got the photos I wanted, of course, taken with full knowledge of what I was doing. After 6 weeks of meticulous planning, I had everything in place. And then I had a thought that gnawed at me. Was I a psychopath? Was it really worth all the trouble just for revenge? But the more I thought about it, the more I knew the answer was yes. I needed this to feel better, to close this chapter once and for all. So, I pushed those doubts aside. One day, I texted Sandy out of the blue. She took forever to reply, and when she finally did, it was awkward, full of empty pleasantries. I told her I wanted to meet up, though I didn't tell her why. That must have gotten her hopes up. She probably thought we'd get back together. She said she could be ready in 15 minutes, but I insisted we meet in 3 hours. I wanted to make her stew in the suspense. The longer she waited, the better. The moment arrived, and I met her in a park. Unsurprisingly, she was already there when I arrived. I had deliberately dragged my feet, and I could see the mix of confusion and anticipation in her eyes. She stood up to hug me, and I let her. It felt easier this way, to make her think there was still a chance. We exchanged a few dry pleasantries, and then I pulled out my phone. I told her to look at the photos I'd sent. Her face, so neutral at first, slowly shifted. The first photo was of me with Sophia, and she furrowed her brow. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Before I could answer, she scrolled down. The next picture was of me with Sophia again. She kept scrolling, past more photos of us, until she came to the ones with Toki. I casually mentioned how much fun I'd had with her, but I could see the tears starting to well up in Sandy's eyes. She couldn't stop scrolling, couldn't stop looking. And then, the final blow, a video of me and Melissa bowling, followed by something far more intimate. She watched it loop 3 times, her face twisted with a mixture of disbelief and anger. I broke the silence with a simple sentence: none of these women are as bad as you made them seem. In fact, they're all a lot better than you, especially where it counts. That was it. She lost it, stood up, pointing her finger at me, screaming expletives, shaking with rage. I wondered if she'd hit me, but she never did. The tirade was endless. "You're a scumbag. You're a piece of crap." I almost tuned her out, feeling a strange satisfaction as I watched her fume. Then she tried to turn the tables. "You made it seem like you're a saint, but you're worse than me," she shouted. But I stopped her right there. I'm not the one who reconnected with my ex, slept with him, kept having charged conversations with him, all while I was engaged, I said calmly. I'm not engaged anymore, and that's because of everything you did. I stood up, adding, "If you're mad, you can only be mad at yourself. This is exactly what you deserved." The words hit her hard. She started crying again, and for the first time, she looked utterly broken. But that was it for me. That was the closure I needed. I felt satisfied. I'd gotten what I came for. Since then, I haven't heard from her, not even when she turned 30. And honestly, I prefer it that way. I don't know if this story offers any practical advice for anyone, but here's what I've learned: no woman is beyond cheating. I used to think that about my ex-fiancée, but she proved me wrong. If you can, sign a prenup. I was lucky to get out before marriage, but others may not be so lucky. And most importantly, if you have reasonable suspicion, check their phone. It's not worth living with someone who gives you trust issues. I got out, and I hope you do too. Seeing your reaction to this story is, well, unexpected, but oddly amusing. Most people would be devastated, but you? You're laughing it off like it's no big deal. Should we be best friends, or is this some twisted nightmare? And let's talk about the revenge. 3 women? That's next level. What do you think of these tactics? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next video.